Welcome to this week's episode of Stranger Stitches. I'll spin you a yarn with enough southern charm and sweet tea to float a boat. These are not news stories, but fact-based tales, and just one of many ways to compile the evidence. This week I have for you the ghostly tale of the haunted Myrtles Plantation. And what I've compiled for you today leans a great deal on the folklore of southern Louisiana. I love Louisiana. I love to go there, especially the southern portions. It's beautiful there, but don't go in the summer. Nice people, great food, rich history, absorb their culture, but do not go in the summer. So, pull up and take a seat. I got a story for you. The Myrtles Plantation is down in St. Francis Parish, southern Louisiana. This place has got more ghosts than Jelly Belly has beans. The plantation draws a curious bunch of folks from all over, and most of them there looking for the spirits, and I'm not talking about alcohol. There isn't much doubt in my mind that the old house is haunted, and according to a lot of folks who have had themselves a little experience there, they believe it to be a beehive of our dearly departed. Now, the plantation was just chunk full of death and tragedy and despair, and I didn't find a whole lot to say that, very often there was a whole lot of happiness going on there. But let's go back 10,000 years, and I promise y'all I'll make it quick. The Tunica Biloxi people called it home for 10,000 years. Now that's putting down some roots. Then came the Spanish Capuchin monks who got themselves a land grant to build their monastery there. And this was a land grant for land that didn't belong to the people that were giving it away. But I'll get off that soapbox and save that speech for another day. And bless they little pea-picking hearts. They probably had no idea what they were getting into anyway. Hurricanes, bugs, snakes, yellow fever, and I know they were there in the summer. And I know that that old worn-out burial grounds plot of a lot of horror movies. Well, in this case, it's gospel truth. There were First Nation people, Capuchins, slaves, and family members all buried in this area. So that was a very diverse neighborhood of the dead. The Myrtles Plantation was built in 1794 by General Dave Bradford, or as they want to call him, Whiskey Dave. And back in the day, they called his estate Laurel Grove. Now, where he gets his nickname was from his involvement in the Whiskey Rebellion, and that's what brought him to Louisiana in the first place. Yeah, he had a tuck tail and run. Well, the Whiskey Rebellion was an uprising in Pennsylvania that protested a federal tax on whiskey. Farmers and distillers relied heavily on whiskey production, and the tax was unfair. The rebellion got real ugly, and nearly 400 of the rioters, try to take out tax collector John Neville, who was the regional tax supervisor. They attacked him and set his property on fire in response to the whiskey tax. This prompted President George Washington to personally go lead the troops to suppress it. So we got some big names getting involved here. General George himself put a bounty on Whiskey Dave's head. So Laurel Grove became his hideout, and he lived there alone for several years. His first attempt to get married ended just days before the ceremony. There's not a whole lot of backstory for that one, but it was mentioned that the bride passed from yellow fever. Later on, he met and married Elizabeth Porter, and they started a family, but he wouldn't move them to Louisiana until he knew that it was safe. And you know what? She knowingly married a wanted man, but mercy damn, don't we love a bad boy. So in 1799, Whiskey Dave got his pardon, and he packed up the whole passel of them children and his wife, and they all went to Louisiana. And just to say, unlike those teetotalers in Boston, none of his golden elixir ever hit the water. So everybody is settled in Louisiana, and his family and business got bigger, and Whiskey Dave needed himself a bigger home, so he built on, and the house became well known all over the region for its size and remarkable workmanship. It was beautiful, mahogany staircase, woodwork imported from England. All of the fancy items that he had in his old house were moved from the East Coast over the mountains, and it cost him a very pretty penny. Bradford would use the parlor as his office where he would meet with his clients. Because he was an attorney, the man was proud as punch of what he could afford and the beauty that his family had created in that home. Also showing off a little because, of course, nobody wants to hire a broke-ass attorney. It just ain't a good look. Let me go on and tell you how Clark Woodruff got his hands on Laurel Grove. Woodruff was born in Litchfield County, Connecticut in 1791. He had no desire to follow in his daddy's footsteps as a farmer, and, that is a lot of work. So he took out of Connecticut at 19 and ended up in Bayou Sara. Still looking to make his fortune, Woodruff placed an advertisement in the St. Francisville newspaper called the Timepiece. In that summer, he told folks that the academy would be opening soon, first Monday in September, for the reception of students. What he was going to teach was English, grammar, astronomy, geography, elocution, composition, penmanship, Greek, and Latin. So if you had little Latin and less Greek, you'd want to be there. They had a lot to teach you. So go and show up early and stay late. But the academy wasn't open very long because Woodruff joined the fight at the Battle of New Orleans right alongside Andrew Jackson. Now, I told y'all there were going to be some big names in this story. When the War of 1812 had ended, Woodruff came back to St. Francisville with the intention of studying law. Whiskey Dave, who is a judge by now, took on students who wanted to study, and one of them was Clark Woodruff. And pretty soon he got his degree, but he also fell ass over tea kettle in love with the judge's daughter, Sarah Matilda. As their blossoms bloomed under the shade of the crepe myrtles, the young couple made it legal in 1817, and for their honeymoon, Woodruff took his blushing bride to the Hermitage in Tennessee. That was the home of his friend, Andrew Jackson. Talk about keeping good company. When Whiskey Dave shuffled off the mortal coil, Woodruff managed Laurel Grove for his mother-in-law, Elizabeth, and he expanded the plantation holdings up to about 650 acres, where they grew indigo and cotton, so expensive crops. Together, he and Sarah Matilda had 3 children. I love these names: Cornelia Gale, James, and Mary Octavia. Tragically, their happiness wouldn't last any longer than the blossoms. So let's meet our first ghost. Probably the most well-known ghost of the Myrtles was Chloe, and she was a slave to Clark and Sarah Woodruff. She was assigned to the house and dealt mostly with the children. By plantation standards, that was a damn good job, and she wanted to make sure that she kept it. By listening in on private conversations, she knew everything that was happening within the house and with the other slaves. Buys, sales, trades, property deals, crop planting. She knew what was coming up, and she knew what was going down. And all of the juicy gossip. She thought she was helping the other slaves, but they told her straight up, quit that shit. The punishment would be swift and severe if she got caught, and hang on, I'm going to get to that. The others did not want to be involved, and by not turning her in, they were involved. Not cool, Chloe, not cool. So what she'd do is she put her ear to the keyhole and lean on the door and listen, and she got caught. Someone from inside that room opened the door. Guess she didn't hear him, and Chloe literally fell into the room and sprawled out on the rug. Well, no explanation would do for that. They hauled her outside immediately, and Clark cut off her ear. And The quote was, "Since you're so fond of intruding on other people's privacy, try it again with one ear," he said. And he also made her to wear a green turban to cover the scar and the shame. Well, apparently Mrs. Woodruff was a little more pissed off than Clark was, and she wasn't having any of that sympathy of the green turban. So what she did was gift her a pair of earrings, knowing full well that Chloe could only wear one. And Mrs. Woodruff would be very insulted if Chloe didn't use her gift. So yeah, that was Mrs. Woodruff's way of keeping that shame factor front and center. But that wasn't enough punishment. She was removed from her job with the children and reassigned to the kitchen. Bad move on the Woodruffs' part, if you ask me, but who was to know that at the time? Chloe, that conniving little Chloe, had herself a plan, and she needed to be in the kitchen to make it work. So what she did was baked a cake for one of the daughters' birthdays. And you know what she did? I'm going to tell you. She put extract of boiled and reduced oleander leaves in it. That shit is deadly poison, y'all. Don't fool with it. The reason she did that was to get to work back in the house. And because she knew she wasn't cut out for kitchen work, and sure as hell wasn't meant for field work, and that was what was going to happen if she had one more little slip up. She needed to get back in good graces. Now, could it be that she had revenge on her mind when she did that, revenge on the Woodruffs? I don't think so. My guess is that she was truly trying to redeem herself by curing the family when they got sick, thinking that she knew the exact cure because she knew the exact poison. I don't know what the hell was on their minds, on her mind anyway, or where she got that information, because even today, the cure for oleander poisoning often involves a temporary pacemaker, which I am sure was not available at the Mercantile. Her plan backfired big time. Only Sarah and the daughters ate the cake. Yeah, and by that evening, they were sick as a dog, all of them. And Chloe knew what was happening, so she prepared her remedy and sent it up to the house. But it didn't work. Not worth a damn. It was supposed to. And so Chloe got desperate and gave herself away and asked another woman what to do. I never intended that anyone get that sick. I fear they are going to die. The answer she got? There's nothing to be done. You've killed them. Everyone that ate that cake was dead within a couple days. Chloe was dragged out of the cabin where she was trying to hide out and was hanged by the other slaves. Her body weighed down and thrown in the Mississippi River, either as punishment for what she had done to the family or to escape punishment by Clark Woodruff for harboring her. Well, no punishment was coming for what happened to Chloe. She was gone, and nobody was sorry to see her go. The exact tree or location isn't known. So Sarah and the girls have passed on, and we're getting ready for the funeral, and I need y'all to be very mindful when you're throwing a wake, and I need to ask y'all to check into the traditions of the wake. Here's what happened. A mirror in the downstairs hallway supposedly holds the spirit of Sarah Woodruff and her girls. Visitors, including yours truly, take selfies in front of that mirror hoping to get photobombed by Sarah or the kids. The mirror was the only one in the house that wasn't covered during the wake. It is a custom in many cultures to cover all the mirrors to prevent the recently departed from getting trapped. People claim to have seen ghost children in the mirror and swear that their little handprints mysteriously appear on the glass. What I saw, I think, looked more like a baby foot. It was like little round toes and stuff. But I'm going to tell you, I saw what I saw, and I'm sticking to it. That mirror has been re-silvered about 10 times over the years, but the images always come back. So after the ladies in his life had passed, Woodruff turned his attention away from farming. He just didn't want to be there anymore and went to his practice of law. He packed up James, left the plantation in the management of a caretaker, and got the hell out of Dodge. Laurel Grove was purchased by Ruffin Gray Sterling. Now, the Sterlings were a wealthy family who owned several plantations on both sides of the Mississippi River, and he and his wife, Mary Catherine Cobb, took over the house, land, buildings, and all the slaves went with the estate. I'm just going to sit with that for a second. Okay, they decided to remodel Laurel Grove from top to bottom. Sterling added hallways, an entire south section. The walls of the original house were repositioned to create bigger rooms, a separate ladies' and gentlemen's parlor, a formal dining room and game room, all the things. They had all the things. They created elaborate plaster cornices for many of the rooms, made from a mixture of clay, Spanish moss, and cattle hair. When I was there, you couldn't notice it, but I'm sure when they were new, that was quite the lovely fragrance. Well, they completed the project and nearly doubled the size of Whiskey Dave's house, and the name was officially changed to the Myrtles. Now, I am wondering if naming an estate is like naming a boat. It is very unlucky to change it, but I don't know. Sterling didn't get to enjoy the house very long. He passed on from consumption, or as tuberculosis was called back then, and he left vast holdings in care of his wife, Mary Cobb, who most folks referred to as a remarkable woman. Many of the plantation owners stated, rather patronizingly from our point of view, that she had the business acumen of a man, which was high praise for a woman back then. Yeah, she's very advanced for a woman. Oh, bless their little hearts. That woman was probably smarter than most of them. The family was visited by tragedy more often than a door-to-door Bible salesman. 9 of the children that were born, only 4 lived into adulthood. Well, time rolls on as it does. Mary Cobb wasn't getting any younger. She was tired, getting worn out, so she hired her son-in-law, William Drew Winter, and that was the husband of her daughter Sarah. Lots of Sarahs in this story. And he was to act as her agent and attorney and help her manage all of the plantations, all of the lands, all of the holdings. And as part of the deal, she gave Sarah and William the Myrtles as their home. Oh, the Civil War wreaked havoc on the Myrtles and the Sterling family. It tore through the South. Many of the family's personal belongings were looted and destroyed by Union soldiers, and the wealth they'd accumulated wasn't worth wiping your ass with because it was all Confederate currency. Yeah, not worth a damn thing. The other part of it was Miss Mary Cobb had invested heavily in sugar plantations, and all of that went away. And that's where we got the everlasting bloodstain. During the Civil War, 3 Union soldiers were caught looting in the house and got themselves shot in the gentleman's parlor, leaving a bloodstain that refused to be wiped away. When the Myrtles became a B&B, a maid said that she was mopping the floor, and when she tried to mop over the stain, the mop wouldn't move. No matter how much she pushed it, she tried to force the mop over the stain, something invisible was preventing her from erasing it from history. Stubborn as a mule, that stain. When I went there, it was pointed out to me. I personally didn't see it, but the power of suggestion, maybe. Some people saw it. Maybe my eyes are bad, which is true. But some in my group said that they saw a shadow of a stain still there. So, okay. Wasn't my experience, but I think they saw something. Well, one of Sarah and William's children was a little girl named Katie, and she caught yellow fever. Mr. Winter was desperate. Yellow fever was killing folks left and right in Louisiana. Whole families were being wiped out in a matter of days, and the doctors couldn't do a damn thing about it. Winter went a plantation over and borrowed a servant from a neighbor by the name of Cleo, who was known throughout the parish as a powerful voodoo priestess. Y'all, please understand, to voodoo in Louisiana, it's not just some Hollywood construct. This is serious business. It's a blend of African traditions, Catholic saints, and Native American healing practices all rolled up. Sounds like a lot of wisdom there. Chloe was what was called a mambo, a high priestess who could commune with the spirits, or as they call them, the Loa. She had a reputation for healing that stretched from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. Cleo arrived at the Myrtles carrying a worn leather satchel filled with herbs, roots, bones, and other sacred items. She set up her ritual in little Katie's room, lighting candles, burning incense that smelled like the bayou itself, earthy, mysterious, and ancient. And then she called upon Papa Legba, the guardian of the crossroads between the living and the dead, asking that Katie remain on our side. And then Dambala, the serpent spirit of healing, her chants filled the room in a language that was French Creole, part African, and something else entirely, something that vibrated the air through the whole house. For hours, Chloe worked and worked, placing protective gree-gree bags around the bed, sprinkling blessed salts in the corners, pressing her hands to the child's burning forehead while whispering prayers to the spirits. She brewed teas from herbs and tried to coax the fever spirit to leave that baby's body. The whole house was holding its breath, waiting and hoping. But sometimes, even the most powerful magic isn't enough to fight what fate's already decided. Little Katie passed away by the next day, despite Chloe's best efforts and most earnest prayers to the spirits. Mr. Winter was not one known for controlling his temper on a good day, and he was beside himself with grief and rage, and someone was gonna pay. In his mind, the voodoo ceremony had failed, and worse, maybe even hastened his daughter's death. Christian folks in those days were very suspicious of voodoo anyway, calling it devil worship. They didn't know anything. Still don't. Winter blamed Cleo for what happened, convinced that her dark magic had somehow cursed his family instead of saving them. Without a trial or even a moment's consideration that this woman had tried to save his child, Winter dragged Cleo out in the front yard and hung her from one of the ancient oaks. That poor woman died knowing she had done everything in her power, but being punished for it anyway. If you believe in the power of voodoo, you also got to believe in the power of a curse. And a mambo killed unjustly, well, that's a kind of injustice that can echo through several generations. And here's the truth. William Winter was brutally murdered right there at the Myrtles. Winter was teaching a Sunday school lesson in the gentleman's parlor when he heard someone approach the house on horseback, and the stranger was calling out, saying he had some business there. Winter went out and got himself shot. Those inside the house, stunned by the gunfire and the sound of retreating hoofbeats, hurried outside to find the fallen man. He was right there on the porch. They took off trying to catch the shooter, but that one was already long gone. Winter needed to see his wife one last time. He struggled toward the top of the stairs, only to pass away in her arms on what is now the infamous 17th step. If you listen carefully at night, you can hear invisible sort of stumbling feet coming up the stairs and stopping on the 17th step. It shivers them. gives me shivers. Later, a local newspaper reported that a man named E.S. Weber was to stand trial for Winter's murder, but no outcome was ever recorded. So far as anyone knows, Winter's killer remains unidentified and unpunished. There's a reason for this. I will see what you think. And now we get to an interesting part from a voodoo perspective. William Winter was murdered suddenly by an unknown assailant. Could it be someone seeking revenge for Cleo? Maybe a relative, maybe another practitioner who knew what Winter had done. In voodoo tradition, when someone is killed unjustly, especially a powerful mambo, the spirits don't just let that slide. They're going to look for justice. And if it don't come naturally, they can make it happen. Some folks have whispered that Cleo's spirit never left the Myrtles, that she's still there, still trying to heal and protect, but also carrying the anger of her unjust death. Could it be that the Winter murder was the spirit's way of settling the score? Maybe just a coincidence, but in Louisiana, where voodoo runs deep as the mud, most folks don't believe in coincidence. Sarah was so devastated by the incident that she never remarried. She remained at the Myrtles with her mother and brothers until her death at the tender age of 44. Poor girl never got over it, losing a child to illness and then a husband to voodoo. At least, her husband met a violent end. That would break anybody's spirit. Some say that she spent her last years talking to empty rooms and conversing with the spirits that Chloe had called up all those years ago. After Mary Cobb's death, the Myrtles was purchased by Stephen Sterling, one of her sons. He bought out his brothers, but only kept the place for a short time. Some say that he squandered what was left of the fortune and lost the plantation in a card game. But most likely, the place was just too in debt for him to hold on to. He sold the Myrtles to Orrin D. Brooks, and it went through several transfers after then. It was purchased by Harris Milton Williams, a Mississippi widower who brought his young son and his second wife to live in the house. Williams had been injured during the Civil War, where he was 15 years old and serving as a Confederate cavalry courier. Williams planted cotton and gained a reputation as a hard-working and industrious man. He and his family, which grew to include 7 children, kept the Myrtles going during the hard times of the post-war South. But tragedy is never far from the Myrtles. During a storm, William's oldest son, Harry, was trying to gather up some of the stray cattle, fell into the Mississippi, and drowned. Shattered with grief, Harrison and Fanny turned over management of the property to their son, Sergeant Minor Williams. Didn't they have great names? And he later married a local girl named Jessie Folks and provided a home at the Myrtles for his spinster sister and maiden aunt, Katie. Now, secretly, people called Katie the Colonel. Behind her back, Katie was a true Southern character, eccentric and kind, but with a very gruff exterior. And she kept life interesting in the house for years. Do y'all know about being a colonel in the South? It's an honorable title, an honorary decree, and it can be assigned to you for various reasons. And the origins go all the way back to the antebellum times, when men of the landed gentry were given the title to commission companies and for financing local militias without any real expectations of them having to do anything. This practice can be dated back to the English Renaissance, when the title was purchased by a lord or prominent gentleman, but the actual command would fall to a lieutenant colonel who would deputize the members. So, yeah, anybody can be a colonel in the South. And then another alleged murder happened in 1927. A caretaker was supposedly killed during a robbery. Once again, no record of this crime exists. And An incident as recent as this would have been well reported. The only event even close to this, which may have spawned the story, occurred when Fannie Williams' brother, Eddie Harrelson, was living in a small house on the property. He was killed during a robbery, but it didn't happen in the main house. But to my thinking, on the ground still counts. There ain't nothing to say that the Myrtles isn't haunted. In fact, I believe it is. There's no denying that the sheer number of accounts reported and collected here would qualify the house as one of the most active hauntings in the country. Miss Frances Myers claimed that she encountered the ghost of the green turban back in 1987. She was sleeping in one of the downstairs bedrooms when she was awakened suddenly by a woman wearing a green turban and a long dress. She was standing silently beside the bed holding a candlestick, so real and so close that candle was giving off a glow that was bouncing off the walls and making shadows. Knowing nothing about ghosts, Miss Myers was scared shitless, pulled the covers over her head and started screaming. Then she slowly peeked out, reached out a hand to touch the woman who had not moved a muscle, and to her amazement, the apparition vanished. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Was that little Katie's bedroom? And was that green turban? I don't know. It sounds to me that was more like Cleo than Chloe, but that's only from my mind. Others claim that they've seen the ghost, and she was reportedly photographed a number of years ago. The resulting images seem to show a woman, but it doesn't fit the description of a young woman like Chloe. Like I said, I think this one is Cleo. There were a number of deaths in the house from yellow fever alone, and it's certainly possible that any of the deceased might have stayed behind after death. If ghosts stay behind in this world because of unfinished business, there are several candidates who could be the restless spirits of the Plantation stories. If we put any stock in these stories, the place is infested with spirits from different periods in the time's history. There have been many reports of children seen playing on the veranda, in the hallways, in the rooms. A young girl with long curly hair wearing an ankle-length dress has been seen floating outside the window of the game room, cupping her hands trying to peer through the glass. Is she Cornelia? Maybe. Or perhaps one of the Sterling children who didn't survive to adulthood? She may be just a little kid looking for someone to play with. The grand piano on the first floor plays by itself, usually repeating the same chord over and over and over again. Sometimes it continues through the night. When someone comes into the room to investigate the sound, it stops. Completely stops, dead silence, and will start again as soon as they leave. Stubborn as hell, that old piano. The TV miniseries remake of A Long Hot Summer was filmed there at the Myrtles Plantation. Crew members repeatedly found furniture mysteriously repositioned after breaks, despite nobody being present in those rooms. When filming concluded successfully, the cast and crew were more than eager to leave that setting behind. Employees at the house often get the worst of what happens there. They are exposed firsthand to the happenings that would have weaker folks running from that place in terror, and some of them do. One employee was hired to greet guests at the front gate each day. One day he was working, and a woman in white, an old-fashioned dress, walked through the gate without speaking to him. She strolled up to the house and vanished through the front door while it was closed. That gate man quit his job faster than you can say boo, and he never looked back. What do you think? Are you a doubter? Y'all remember, it's hard to prove a negative. The absence of evidence is not evidence of a ghost's absence. I think it's got a vibe for sure. I felt it most strongly out by the pond. But nothing creepy or frightening. My mama was with me, and she said the same thing. It felt just like big energy. As we sat out on the veranda, we had ourselves a big glass of sweet tea and made sure to offer some to the residents. Just seemed the polite thing to do. That's me for this week, y'all. Sweet dreams. I'll see you next time.
Gonna fly a plane over Pontchartrain. We'll get there by any means. End up in New Orleans. When we get there, head to Jackson Square. Put on your bandana down in Louisiana. We'll go to Texarkana down in Louisiana. Eat plantains and bananas.